There was a time when truck stops weren't just places to refuel and grab a tea, they were the social heartbeat of the British haulage world. Back in the 1980s, long before mobile phones and sat-navs, these roadside havens were everything to a driver. They were where deals were struck, mates were made, fry-ups were legendary, and the parking bays were filled with the roar of British diesels cooling down after long overnight hauls. Some of these truck stops were so iconic, they felt like second homes. And while most of them have vanished, been modernized beyond recognition, or turned into service chains, the memories haven't gone anywhere. Ask any lorry driver who was behind the wheel in the 80s, and chances are the blue boar at Watford Gap on the M1 will come up in conversation first. This wasn't just a service stop, it was a proper institution. The food was dependable, the banter better than anything you'd get off the telly, and the drivers who parked there knew the rules of the road like gospel. You could walk into the canteen, hang up your jacket, and recognize half the lads by name. Rumor had it, even rock stars like Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles stopped there on tour. But to truckers, it was less about the glamour and more about the comfort. Tea that never ran out, eggs cooked in a pan, not a microwave, and the feeling that you weren't alone out there. Then there was the Stibbington Diner off the A1 near Peterborough. If you were running loads up the eastern side of the country, this stop was gold. It had that proper greasy spoon feel, formica tables, handwritten menus, and sausages that looked like they'd been stolen from a butcher's window. Stibbington was famous for its early morning breakfasts. You'd roll in at 5:30, still half asleep from a night drive, and the staff would have your mug filled before you even sat down. You could smell the fried bread halfway down the A1. Over on the A34 near Oxford, there was a lesser-known gem simply called the A34 Café. No flashy signs, no big-name branding, just a squat little building with lorries parked nose to tail outside. It was run by a couple who knew every regular's name and never watered down the beans. The jukebox was always stuck on status quo or dire straits, and if you stayed past 9 PM, the truckers would be trading war stories about the M25 like it was a battlefield. It was the kind of place where your cup of tea was strong enough to wake the dead and the bacon butties came in doorstops. Further north, on the A11 near Thetford, there was the Red Lodge truck stop, a big favourite among drivers heading to and from the ports. Red Lodge wasn't fancy, but it was consistent. Hot food, clean loos, and no nonsense. What really made it stand out was the camaraderie. You'd pull up next to an ERF or a Scania, and the driver would be out the door before you even set your brake, asking where you'd come from, where you were going, and if you'd heard the weather was turning in Hull. It felt like a brotherhood on wheels. And then you had Fortin Services off the M6, with its iconic Pennine Tower looming overhead like something out of Thunderbirds. The tower was meant to be a fancy sit-down restaurant, but most drivers never made it that far up. Downstairs was where the real magic happened. Rows of parked lorries with sleeping bags visible in the cabs, queues of drivers swapping route tips, and that strange comforting smell of diesel and fried onions. Fortin had proper character. It was a landmark, both visually and emotionally. What made these places special wasn't the decor or the menu, it was the feeling. The sense that you weren't just another driver burning hours. These truck stops knew who you were. They didn't judge you for coming in with oily boots or slumping over a chipped mug of tea like you'd just driven from Aberdeen. They were places where you could get warm, be seen, and rest without worrying that you were holding up progress. In those days, truck stops weren't optimized or franchised or sanitized to death. They were loud, warm, gritty places that felt real. Drivers helped each other out with breakdowns, job leads, and advice on which weighbridge was active that week. The road might have been long and cold, but these stops made it human again. And while most of these legendary spots have faded away or been bought up and blandified, their spirit still lingers in the minds of the old school drivers. Because in a world that's becoming more automated by the mile, those moments of real connection over a shared pot of stew or a bad joke about axle weight are what made the road life bearable. Back when the motorway network still felt like the Wild West and your tachograph was more of a loose suggestion than a strict rule, the next great British truck stop on every driver's lips was Charnock Richard Services on the M6. It wasn't just the location, right in the thick of the Northwest action, it was the spirit. The old footbridge that spanned the motorway became a symbol of proper road culture. You'd park up, stretch your legs after a long haul from Birmingham or beyond, and walk into a building that felt more like a village hall than a corporate lobby. Inside was a mix of high-vis jackets, cigarette smoke, and that comforting buzz of shared exhaustion. They served pies the size of steering wheels, and there was always a driver who knew a shortcut through Preston you'd never heard of. Then you had the Scratchwood services on the M1, down south near London. A lot of drivers called it the last proper stop before things got chaotic. London's roads were never friendly to HGVs, even in the 80s, so Scratchwood became a kind of mental buffer zone. You could brace yourself with a strong cuppa, one last greasy plate of bacon and black pudding, and chat with lads who had just come out of the capital, looking like they had survived a war zone. It had grit, a sense of real community, and it wasn't rare to see a frustrated driver walk in with a road atlas in one hand and an open sandwich in the other, asking, "Is the North Circular even real?" Out east, not far from Norwich, there was the Thickthorn truck stop, sitting quietly off the A47. This one didn't shout for attention, but drivers loved it because it didn't pretend to be anything it wasn't. The food was always ready, always hot, and never fancy. Drivers who ran loads to the coast, containers, farm goods, or even circus kit, always made a pit stop here. There was a loyalty about it. People would park up early just to make sure they got their usual booth by the window, and if you were there on a cold, wet night in January, nothing hit better than their meat pie and mash, followed by a pudding drowning in custard. Another stop that's permanently burned into the memories of 1980s lorry men is the Café Royal on the A5 near Cannock. The A5 was still a critical artery in those days, before all the bypasses and motorway upgrades took over. Café Royal was old school. No automatic tills, no plastic tray lanes, no health-conscious options. You wanted chips? You got a mountain of chips. You wanted tea? You got it strong enough to strip paint. And it was open stupidly late, which meant if you were running behind schedule or stuck with a dodgy alternator, you still had somewhere to go. Somewhere to feel human for 20 minutes before getting back on the road. And lastly, but certainly not least, we had the Lim truck stop on the M6 just south of Warrington. Now this wasn't just a truck stop, it was a legend. The truck park was massive, and on Friday nights it felt like a festival. Drivers from Scotland to Southampton would converge here, tell tall tales, swap CB radios, and sometimes even spark up lifelong friendships. The diner was open all hours, and the menu had everything from fry-ups to full steak dinners. Some would argue it was the birthplace of half the road gossip circulating in Britain at the time. Heard someone flipped a Foden up in Lincolnshire. The first place that rumour spread was Lim. It was where jobs were found, deals were whispered, and lonely nights were turned into memories worth having. What made these truck stops unforgettable wasn't just the food or the facilities, it was the people, the banter, the shoulder claps, the shared silence between two men staring out a rain-soaked window after 500 miles on the clock. These places were working-class sanctuaries, no frills, no fanfare, just warmth, reliability, and familiarity in a world that never stopped moving. In the 80s, a lorry driver could count on these stops to make the job a little less rough, and in return, those places earned a lifetime of loyalty. Today, some of them have been turned into sterile rest stops, filled with vending machines and LED menus. But if you look hard enough, or talk to the right driver in the right pub, you'll still hear the names passed around like sacred relics. The roads may have changed, but the memories haven't.